Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. So I'm going to discuss a couple of the halachot which related to the day of the Omer that we're approaching now. I'm not going to say yet which day it is. Everybody knows. I'll explain why in a moment. I'm going to talk about two halachic issues which come up, which is worth talking about. I'm not going to talk about the mystical meaning, etc., behind the day. The truth is, it's a day that is very much shrouded in mystery. But the first is Halakha in Shulchan Aruch, and says as follows. Maybe a way of introduction, I'll say as well. So last year, I remember, it was quite amusing. There was one of the TV channels in this country. So they have a show where every night, it's a news show, and every night during the Omer, the first thing they do is they count the Omer on TV. The presenter puts on a kippah, he says the bracha, he counts. Oh, it's a nice gimmick, whatever. So last year was the last night before Shavuot, right now, the 49th night of the Omer, and he's about to, and he was so proud of himself that every night they'd done it and they hadn't forgotten, so he puts on, he's about to put on his kippah, he puts on his kippah, he says, okay, before we start the show, we're going to count. Tonight's the last night of the Omer and we're going to count. And he said, you just said, tonight's the last night of the Omer, can you still, then he wasn't sure if he could still count on that afterwards or not. So this is based on, it's really based on the Abu Draham. I think if you'd asked the TV presenter if he knew that it was the Abu Draham, he probably would not have been able to tell you. But everybody knows that there's Halakha in Shulchan Aruch, right? And everybody knows it because every night when we remind people to count, we say, last night we counted so and so. We don't say what we counted tonight for the following reason. It says the Shulchan Aruch, and again, and it's particularly relevant tonight. He says, Misha shoel oto chavero, ben hashmashot kam yamei sfara hazeh balayla. So somebody asks, why ben hashmashot? We'll see. But somebody asks his friend before you get to Maariv, before you get to the time of counting, say, how many nights are we counting tonight, right? We can't remember what it is. Is coming meisfar bazeh layla. Yomar lo etmol haya kach v'kach. Okay, the fact that we say yesterday we counted so and so, we didn't just make it up. That's the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says that's what you should do. Why? She'im yomar lo hayom kach v'kach. If you say, tonight is night such and such of the Omer, well, then you've just counted. Then, and you can't go back and count with a bracha. That's if it's from Ben Hashmashot and onwards. If he asked him before Ben Hashmashot, during the day, right? So somebody asked me earlier today, what night do we count of the Omer? And you would say, tonight we count such and such. Since it's not yet the time to count, then that would be fine. So I say, so that is particularly relevant today, because today is the only day of the Omer where the name of the day is actually the count of the Omer. So we have to be careful about saying it beforehand. So that's based on the Abu Draham. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and that's why we all do it. We all say we counted yesterday such and such. Now the Taz raises an interesting question on this. That says, wait a minute. We know that we have a principle which is mitzvot shrichot kavanah. In order to fulfill a mitzvah, you have to have the intent. So he says, if a person is okay, but the Shulchan Aruch seems to pass in that way. Certainly by Kriyat Shema, that's what he says, right? It's a machlok, it's throughout the Gemara, different opinions. So he says, if somebody asks you what the day is, right? The fact is, you're not saying the bracha, and you don't intend to count. You just intend to tell somebody what the day is. So then it shouldn't really matter. Why is the Shulchan Aruch going out of his way and saying we have to say yesterday was such and such? So that's the Taz. There are a number of different answers that are given to this. Mishnah Brura, etc., do not accept this Taz, and they say that you should be stringent for this opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. I'll tell you, the Mishnah Brura. He says, then you have a problem going back and counting again with the bracha. So the Mishnah writes, he says, Shekvar yatzav b'zeh yedei sfira Leman de'amar mitzvot ein tzrichot kavanah. Okay, certainly for the opinion that says that mitzvot do not require kavanah, you have already fulfilled the mitzvah. Ve'afta anan kaim alan tzrichot kavanah. And even though we say ordinarily mitzvot do require intent, they're saying that you weren't actually intending to count and fulfill the mitzvah of Shvirat Omer yet. So he says, Le'inyan bracha tzarich lachmir v'lachush le'achdea. We are the same way as we've spoken already. We are take on certain extra stringencies when we're worried about making a bracha levatala. So therefore, for the bracha, that's why we're going to be more machmir, and we're going to take into account this opinion. And therefore, in such a situation, you should not count afterwards. Now, the poskim point out there are a number of cases, according to everybody, where if you said the day before you meant to count, you can still count afterwards. Okay, so at least 4 cases which come up, which are as follows. Number 1, whenever we count, we know that we have to say, what's the first word we say? You say hayom. You say today is such and such a day of the Yom. So if somebody asks you, what are we counting today? And you say, today we're counting such and such, that could be a problem. If somebody says, what are we counting today? And you say 17, so that's not a problem because today is not 17. But also because you didn't say the word today. Then you can go back and you could say the bracha as well. Also, if a person, we have here a discussion about whether one needs kavanah or doesn't need kavanah. But if one has kavanah, one has intent in such a case as well. We don't want to do this because we don't want to confuse people. Because you're going to ask, the Gabbai is going to get up in shul and he's going to announce, tonight we count, or, make sure that you count whatever. And the Gabbai knows that he's got intent not to be yotz. We don't want to rely on that as well. Another point, which is the following, which is, I think the Mishnah Berurah points this out as well. He says that this might only be talking about in the first week, what the Shulchan Aruch is saying over here, because when we count, we know we have a mitzvah to count both days and to count weeks. So if somebody asks you, right, let's just say, take an arbitrary number, 17, and somebody says, what are we counting tonight? You would say 17. Most people would not say, we're counting 17, which is 2 weeks and 3 days, right? So, but you would have to, you only fulfill the mitzvah if you've listed the days and the weeks. So therefore, if you just said the days, you actually don't have to worry. You could still go back and count again with the bracha, but nonetheless, we try and avoid it. We try not to get into any safek at all. And as we mentioned already, the Shulchan Aruch said explicitly regarding that if it was, the Shulchan Aruch spoke about Ben HaShmashot and before Ben HaShmashot. Right? So he said if you listed whatever day it was before Ben HaShmashot, while it was still day, that's the time when you cannot count. So then that's no problem. What if you said it during Ben HaShmashot? So it seems to be the minhag during the days of the Shulchan Aruch might have been that people would gather. It's discussion whether you can count during Ben HaShmashot. According to our minhag, where we wait until after Tzeit HaKochavim, we wait until it is certainly Vadai nightfall. So according to that, if a person every night counts, make sure to count after dark, and somebody asks you during Bein HaShmashot, between Shkia and Tzeit HaKochavim, and then you answer, so we can assume that since you always count only after Tzeit HaKochavim, if you said the number beforehand, you weren't intending to count the day, and therefore you can go back and count again with the bracha. Okay, and as I said at the beginning, everybody points out that tonight is the night one has to be careful not to say the day of the Omer before you said the bracha, even though based on all the reasoning that I've said now, if I was to mention it now, it would probably be okay, and we could still go back and count with the bracha, but nonetheless I won't, just so not to confuse you further. So that is one issue that comes up every day of the Omer, but related to Lag BaOmer as well. Another issue that comes up is, of course, the question of the Minhagei Aveilut, the customs of mourning that we have throughout the Sfirah, and the custom not to shave and not to have haircuts and not to have weddings, etc. And then Lag BaOmer is when things change. So again, this is all very much shrouded in mystery. The main reason why we have these mourning customs, we understand based on the Gemara that says that Rabbi Akiva's students all died. Again, exactly the very, actually alluded to it on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Those who are here, Because the Gemara says that the Talmidim, the students of Rabbi Akiva, all died because lo nagu kavod zeh bazeh. They didn't show respect to one another, and everybody asked the question. Rabbi Akiva was the one who said, "Ve'afta l'recha kamocha zeh klal gadol b'Torah." If there's anybody in the world, if there's any Rav ever whose Talmidim should know how to treat one another with respect, it would be Rabbi Akiva. So how can it be that Dafka Rabbi Akiva is the one whose students don't treat each other with respect? From my Golden suggested one answer. There are other answers that are suggested. I'll leave you to think about it. I'm not going to go into that now. But it says that they all died, and the question is, when do they stop dying? So there are those who say that Lag BaOmer, essentially the 33rd day of the Omer, that was when they stopped dying. And therefore, that is the time, that is the day that we can stop all the mourning customs of mourning, and that is when we can start celebrating again by cutting our hair, not saying Tachanun. Not saying Tachanun is always a reason to celebrate. So that's the one explanation is Baal HaMaor, and others bring this. They say that from the beginning, from Pesach and onwards, they were dying, and the plague, whatever it was, stopped when we get to Lag BaOmer. Tosfot says a slightly different explanation. Tosfot says no, they died throughout this period. Throughout the period from Pesach to Shavuot. But amazing thing, any day that you don't say Tachanun, okay, they didn't die. Why should it be that way? But there were special days, not because it's not a din in Tachanun. It's not that saying Tachanun is what killed you. But many people think that saying Tachanun is going to kill them, but that's not the case. But if you count up the days of Shabbat, the days of Yom Tov, the days of Rosh Chodesh that we have within the 49-day period, so we're left with 33 days. Only for 33 out of the 49 days they died, and for the other days they didn't. So whether it's something which took place throughout the Sphira, or whether it's something that started and then stopped at Lag BaOmer, that is a discussion amongst the Rishonim. Day 33 or day 34 is when the mourning customs stop. So the Shulchan Aruch writes like this. It says, "Noagin shelo listaper ad lamed gimel haOmer." The custom is not to have haircuts, etc., until the 33rd day of the Omer. Shomim. Ve'en listaper ad yom lamed daled baboker. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins say you have to wait because for 33 days they were dying, and it was really only the 34th day not. So then it's only on day 34 in the morning. We'll talk in a moment because this year is going to be different. But on day 34 in the morning, that is when one can start cutting hair, etc. We have a principle throughout the Hilchot Avelut where we say miktzata yom kekulo. It's applied by Shiva and by Shloshim, etc. That we say so long as you've had a little part of the day that has been you've kept the morning for that day. So therefore, he says in the morning of day 34, that is when you can cut your hair and shave. Elam ken chal yom lamed gimel erev Shabbat. Says the Shulchan Aruch, unless like this year, where the 33rd day falls out on Erev Shabbat, no difference here between, we'll see what Ashkenazim say in a moment. But the Shulchan Aruch says in that day you can bring it forward to before Shabbat. Says the Ramah, Uvamdinot elu eino agin kidvarav. In our places we don't hold this way. Our minhag is different. And amistaprim b'yom lamed gimel u'marbim bo b'ktzat simcha ve'ein omrim bo tachanun. Right? He says on day 33 already you can start cutting your hair and you can have a little bit of simcha. As we said, and not say tachanun, which for most people is a reason for a lot of simcha. But that's that. So generally speaking, machloket between the Shulchan Aruch on day 33, according to the Shulchan Aruch, only on day 34. In a year, says the Shulchan Aruch, like this year when it falls out on Erev Shabbat. So then, Lechavod Shabbat, you can on Thursday night to wait until the morning. Okay, we go the night before. So it sounds like from the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah that you have to wait until the morning. And as we say, the principle of, or based on when do we say miktzat yom kekulo? Does that mean part of the day, meaning part of the day from the morning? Or do we say part of the day, part of the 24-hour period already from the night before? That's a machloket rishonim. And the Shulchan, so the Mishnah Berurah says over here the following. He says, so the Ramah continues. He says, So he says you have to wait until it's actually the 33rd day kicks in and not from the day before. Now, the Mishnah writes like this. He says, Yesh machronim shemekilin nistaper miba'elev. He says there are those who allow one to already start from the night before. Okay, there's a discussion here about weddings, whether you can have weddings already the night before or during the day. But regarding haircuts, so he says, Achen, כשחל ל"ג בעומר בערב שבת, והוא לא שבת חג. Okay, so in it falls on Friday, and that is a shatat chak, because Friday is always a shatat chak, right? Erev Shabbat, it doesn't matter if Shabbat's coming in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or it's coming in at 8 o'clock at night. It's always tight. Whatever it is, לעשות ביום, אפשר שיש להקל לו לעשות בלילה שלפניו. Therefore, he says there is definitely room to be maker and to shave or cut one's hair already the night before. So, bottom line is, all the poskim say is Ashkenazim, Sfardim, whatever, when it falls on Friday, that one can have one's hair cut and shave, etc. on Friday morning. If one needs to, if one's not going to have time throughout the day on Friday, and one needs to shave L'chavod Shabbos, then one can do it on Thursday night as well. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Shomer, Sakadosh Baruch Hu Zakot Yisrael, Yivarach B'aleim, Mitzvot Shneimah Adonai Chvetz Ma'atzivko, Yagdir Torah V'yat.